Hey everyone. Today we're diving into a divorce story that'll make you rethink love after decades. Can a marriage of 40 years just end? I'm Ellen, 64, and I thought my life with Tom was set our cozy Seattle home, Sunday brunches, retirement plans. But last spring, I found myself staring at him across the kitchen table, feeling like a stranger sat there. It wasn't one big fight. It was 1,000 tiny cracks, missed glances, silent dinners, dreams we stopped sharing. I'd wake up wondering who I was outside of us. One evening, I said it out loud, Tom. I think we're done. His coffee cup froze midair, his eyes wide, but he didn't argue. That silence was louder than any argument. After 40 years, 2 kids, and a lifetime of memories, we were facing a gray divorce. My heart ached, not just for love lost, but for the life I'd have to rebuild. Could I start over at my age? The question haunted me as I looked at our old photo albums, wondering where we went wrong. Stick with me to uncover the truth behind our unraveling. The days after felt surreal. I walked through our house, touching the furniture we'd picked together: a oak dining table, a worn armchair, each piece a reminder of us. Tom slept in the guest room, and we avoided each other, like roommates with a shared past. I called our daughter, Lisa, to break the news. Her voice cracked, asking, "Why now?" Mom, I didn't have an answer, just a gnawing need to find myself. Friends were shocked. They saw us as the perfect couple. But perfection hides cracks. I met with a lawyer, Susan, who warned that dividing 40 years of assets would be messy. My pension, our savings, the house, it was all on the table. At night, I lay awake, picturing a future alone. Would I be lonely? Could I afford to live? The weight of starting over at 64 pressed down. But there was a flicker of something else. Hope. Maybe for a life that was mine. I wasn't sure what came next. But I knew I couldn't stay in a marriage that felt like a shadow. The air in our kitchen was thick that night, the kind of heavy you can't breathe through. I sat across from Tom, my hands wrapped around a cold mug of tea, and said it again. We need to divorce. His face crumpled, not with anger, but with something softer: resignation. Maybe 40 years, and it came to this. He asked, "Are you sure, Ellen?" I nodded, my throat tight. I expected a fight, but Tom just sighed, like he'd felt the cracks too. We talked, really talked, for the first time in years. He admitted he'd been drifting, lost in routine, while I confessed I'd felt invisible. It wasn't about blame, it was about truth. But truth didn't make it easier. By the end, we agreed to part ways, a decision that felt both right and shattering. The next morning, I called Lisa and our son, Michael. Lisa cried, begging us to try counseling, while Michael was quiet, shocked. "You guys are in your 60s, he said, as if age glued us together. I felt their pain like a knife, but I couldn't back down. I met Susan, my lawyer, who laid out the process: mediation first, court, if we couldn't agree. Tom hired his own lawyer, a kind man named David, and we set a date to talk assets. I looked at Tom across the table as he left for the guest room. His shoulders slumped. We'd built a life: kids, a home, memories, and now we'd tear it apart. My heart ached for the family we'd been, but I saw a spark of freedom, too. I was terrified, yet something in me whispered that this was my chance to live for myself, not just as Tom's wife. The decision was made, but the fallout was just beginning. Dividing 40 years of a life isn't like splitting a check. It's surgery, precise and painful. I sat with Susan in her office, papers spread out like a map of my marriage. The house, our savings, my pension, Tom's retirement fund, everything had to be sliced up. Our Seattle home, with its creaky porch and rose garden, was the heart of it. I wanted to keep it, not just for memories, but for stability. Susan warned that staying meant taking on more debt. Since Tom's lawyer was pushing for a 50-50 split, my pension was modest, enough for a quiet life, but not if I had to buy Tom out. I looked at the numbers and felt my chest tighten. This wasn't just about money. It was every Christmas morning, every late-night talk, every fight we'd survived. Tom and I met for mediation, our lawyers like referees. He looked tired, his gray hair thinner than I remembered. We started with smaller things, furniture, photo albums, but the house loomed. I argued it was my anchor, where I'd raised our kids. Tom said he deserved half its value to fund his retirement. His voice was steady, but his eyes flickered with something guilt. Maybe. We went back and forth, each concession a wound. I offered to give up some savings if I could keep the house. Tom hesitated, then agreed, but only if I covered the remaining mortgage. I left the room shaken, picturing the years of payments ahead. This was the cost of freedom, and it hurt more than I'd expected. Every item we divided, our old record player. The kids' artwork felt like losing a piece of myself. But I held on to the hope that what I'd gain was worth more. The reality of living alone at 64 settled in like a cold fog. I'd always been Tom's wife, Lisa and Michael's mom, the one who kept the house running. Now, I was just Ellen, and I wasn't sure who that was. The mediation agreement left me the house, but the mortgage payments loomed, eating into my pension. I pictured my future: no more impromptu trips to the coast, no cozy retirement with Tom. Instead, I'd be budgeting every penny, maybe selling the car to make ends meet. At night, I wandered the house, its silence deafening. The guest room, still Tom's for now, held his old sweaters, and I wondered if I'd miss him more than I admitted. I tried to imagine independence, taking art classes, traveling solo, joining a book club, but fear crept in. What if I got sick? What if I couldn't afford the house long-term? I called Lisa, hoping for comfort, but she was distant, still reeling from the divorce. "You're so brave, Mom," she said, but it felt like a polite lie. I wasn't brave. I was terrified. One morning, I sat on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the roses Tom had planted. They were still blooming, despite everything. That gave me a flicker of hope. Maybe I could bloom too, in this new life. I started small, rearranging the living room, signing up for a painting class. Each step felt like defiance against the loneliness. I wasn't ready to love this new chapter, but I was determined to try. The house was mine, but so was the uncertainty, and I had to face both head-on. Mediation grew heavier as Tom and I dug into the past. One afternoon, in a quiet moment between asset talks, he looked at me and said, "I regret not listening more." His words caught me off guard, like a door creaking open to a room I'd locked. I'd spent months blaming him for our drift, but now old regrets of my own surfaced. I'd stopped sharing my dreams, to my wish to travel, to paint, to be more than a wife and mom. I'd buried those to keep the peace. thinking it was love. Sitting there, I admitted it. I shut you out, too. It wasn't an apology, just truth, raw and overdue. Our lawyers shifted uncomfortably, but this wasn't for them. It was us, seeing the cracks we'd both ignored. That confession changed things. We talked about the years we'd coasted raising kids, paying bills, forgetting each other. Tom regretted taking a job that kept him away. I regretted not fighting for my own space. These weren't excuses, just pieces of a puzzle we'd never solved. It made dividing assets harder, not easier. Every decision splitting the savings, valuing the house, felt like tallying our failures. I wanted to keep my painting supplies, a symbol of the life I'd postponed. Tom asked for his old fishing gear, a nod to weekends we'd lost. We agreed, but the weight of those regrets lingered. I left the meeting drained, wondering if we could have fixed things years ago. The divorce was still right, but now it carried the ache of what might have been. I drove home, the Seattle rain blurring my windshield, knowing these truths would shape the life I was building alone. The divorce didn't just split Tom and me, it fractured our world. Lisa stopped calling as often, her texts short and clipped, like she blamed me for breaking the family. Michael was kinder but distant, busy with his own life. I'd expected their support, but instead, I felt their judgment. Friends were worse. At our book club, Jane, my oldest friend, asked, "Why now?" "Ellen, you had a good life." Her words stung, as if I'd thrown away something sacred. Others whispered. Picking sides, some saw Tom as the victim. Others pitied me. I hadn't realized how much our marriage defined me to them. Now, I was the woman who gave up at 64, and it hurt more than I'd admit. I tried to explain at a coffee meetup, but my words faltered. How do you describe a marriage that's quietly faded? I felt like an outsider in my own circle. Even our neighbors, once chatty, grew polite, but cool. Tom faced it. Too. He mentioned losing golf buddies who didn't know how to handle our news. The social fallout was a mirror, reflecting how much we'd leaned on us to fit in. One night, I sat alone, staring at old photos, missing the ease of our old life. But then I went to my painting class, where no one knew me as Tom's wife. There, I was just Ellen, and their smiles felt like a lifeline. The divorce was isolating, but it pushed me to find new connections, ones that saw me, not my marriage. I wasn't ready to forgive the friends who'd turned away, but I was learning I didn't need them to move forward. The final mediation session felt like stepping off a tightrope. Tom and I sat across from each other, our lawyers' pens scratching as we hashed out the last details. The house was mine, but I'd take on the mortgage. Tom kept his retirement fund, and we split the savings evenly. It sounded fair, but every number felt like a piece of our life carved away. Still, something had shifted since our talk about regrets. Tom's voice was softer, less defensive, and I caught myself meeting his eyes without anger. We weren't fighting to win anymore. We were trying to let go. When Susan suggested a clause for future medical expenses, Tom agreed quickly, saying, "I want you to be okay." "Ellen." I nodded, my throat tight, surprised by the relief his words brought. As we signed the papers, I felt a strange calm. The divorce wasn't a victory. It was an ending, but also a beginning. We shook hands, a formal gesture that felt absurd after 40 years. Outside, the Seattle air was crisp, and I stood by my car, watching Tom walk away. I didn't hate him. I didn't love him either. I just saw us as two people who'd tried and failed, but tried again to part with grace. Driving home, I thought of Lisa and Michael, hoping they'd understand someday. The agreement gave me the house, but more importantly, it gave me peace. I could live with the mortgage, the smaller budget, because I'd gained something priceless myself. The weight of 40 years lifted, not entirely, but enough to let me breathe. I was ready to face whatever came next, not as Tom's wife, but as Ellen, whole and free. The divorce papers were signed, and I stood in my quiet house, the roses outside blooming despite the autumn chill. I kept the home, but it felt different now, mine, not ours. I started small, painting the living room a soft blue, hanging my own artwork. Lisa visited, her hug tighter than before, and said, "You seem happier." "Mom, I was in ways I hadn't expected. I joined a hiking group, laughed with strangers who became friends, and took a solo trip to the Oregon coast. At 64, I was learning to live for myself, not a role I'd played for decades. The mortgage was tight, but I budgeted carefully, finding joy in simple things, coffee on the porch, a new book. One evening, I found an old letter from Tom, written during our first year together, full of dreams we'd long forgotten. I didn't cry. I smiled, grateful for the good years, and tucked it away. The divorce hadn't erased our past. It freed me to build a future. I wasn't lonely. Not really. I had myself, and that was enough. What do you think? Have you ever started over later in life? Share below. And if this story moved you, hit like and subscribe for more.